I'm not the best one at being organized about how long I speak, so I'm warning you. But it's one of the great pleasures of my life to be able to tell what God has done, and that's really where it is. The first I wanted to tell you is about my own call. I was born into a missionary-minded family. My father, I think he would have gone to China if my mother had better health, right at the word go. And so we heard about missions and missionaries, and at every meal we prayed for some missionary or somebody like that. And my sister, 4 years older than I, that's all she wanted to do. Let me get ready to go to China. And I guess I wasn't quite in the same category. And I became a Christian as a very small child, and it was very real to me. And I said to the Lord, I want to serve you, but please, could I do it here? Here in England, because I don't fancy having to learn a new language. I don't fancy having to travel a long way away. And so please, if you don't mind, I would like to work with orphans here in England. They're very needy people. And God gave me that opportunity. I worked for Dr. Bernardo's homes as a teacher for 4 years, and while I was doing that, I had this rather sneaking feeling at the back of my mind that it wasn't forever, and that there was something else. And God spoke to me through an occasion that many of you will remember, when the Auca Indians killed those 5 men. And it was so shocking. I mean, it was all over the papers and so on. And I remember sitting in church on that Sunday after, and I didn't hear one word of the sermon. It was just going through me all the time. What made it all happen? And God said, well, they are not the only ones who don't know anything about me.
That's
There
right.
are many more. And who is going to go? And those words from Isaiah, who will go and whom shall I send? And I just said, Lord, here I am, send me. And so that's how I got my call. And I was already a teacher and so on, and started to do the necessary things. And of course, I went to one of these first Wycliffe things on that camp, and we were all huddled into a tent with our beds and so on and so forth. And when the end of the first part of the course came, and most people went away because people who were wanting to learn a new language, but it was a written language, they would come and get all the help they could, and then they would go. But those of us who were going to work with an unwritten language had to do a further course. So there weren't many of us, and I knew everybody. I knew everybody who was left. And then suddenly I saw this person coming down the hill, and I thought, why? Who's that? Who's coming to start now? It's too late. We're nearly at the end of this course. And into my head came these words: that is going to be your future husband.
Excellent.
Was not what I wanted to hear. I didn't come for this. I came to get myself ready to go. And quite honestly, to be truthful, I forgot about it, completely forgot about it. But God reminded me towards the end of the course, because John obviously had other ideas. And there he is, and he would have been here doing a much better job than I am had he lived. So we got ourselves ready and went to the States to do further preparation. That's what you had to do in those days. And then we were assigned to Brazil. And by this time I had one baby. And so we set off to come to Brazil when my firstborn was 3 weeks old. So that was quite a thing to do, you know. And we got to Rio and started to learn Portuguese. I knew one word of Portuguese when I first went to Rio. And so we started on the language there, and then we were praying that God would lead us to the tribe he wanted us to work with, the people. So during that time, we were learning Portuguese, getting used to Brazil and so on. We did think about various tribal groups that we heard about and asked God to really direct us and direct our director. And at that time, there was, down in the southwest, if you can see the map here, down here near the Paraguayan border, there was a Brazilian mission, the Kaiwa mission, that had been started because the gentleman who came and found the Kaiwa was an American who felt God wanted him to be a missionary, but he didn't know who to or anything, but he just felt he had to come to Brazil. And he started off on the Amazon and saw various tribal groups and kept going down, down, down. And never did he feel that God was calling him to that particular group. But when he got to the Kaiwa, they were dying out, actually. They had TB, and they just had a yellow fever epidemic. There were a lot of orphans. In fact, Donna Lloyd, the lady who was the wife of the leader of the mission then, she opened an orphanage in the area of the mission, and they had 100 children in there. I mean, it was no easy task. Mm-hmm. And that group of people, through God's wonderful grace, they just formed this mission. And that was where we were called to go. We were called to go there because John had done Hebrew and Greek and everything, in Cambridge. No, Oxford, he wouldn't like that, would he? And he'd done his degree in that, and so he was very, as somebody said the other day, he used to read his Greek New Testament as though it was his English Bible. And so that was very useful, and they needed him to go over into Paraguay because they were checking the scriptures there that were being translated. And so we knew that this is where God had called us to go. And arrived there, I still, with my baby by this time was about 9 months. And then we were landed in a situation where people were speaking a language all around us, and we had no idea anything about it. And there we started. And I just think about those early days, and the people were so patient, They were amazed that we could write something on paper and then read it back to them, and it was their language. I was really amazed about this. And so we started on Kaiwa, bit by bit by bit. And then we felt we needed to be living near to them. So we built a grass roof house, and we moved out to the edge of the reservation. So we had people in our house all day that were Kaiwa speakers. They weren't mixing us up with Portuguese at all. Funnily enough, my little boy, when he began to talk, he spoke English to us, and he knew when to speak Kaiwa to the Kaiwa, and he knew when to speak Portuguese. I think that's amazing. That's what God did. And so we had a very good time because we were immersed with them, their thoughts. We had a witch doctor just across the road, and we heard the rattle shaking and the singing for the rain, etc. And all of that was happening around us. And I had a wood burning stove, that didn't always burn, and all the rest of it. But one day, just as Satan had said to me, you would never like to leave your own country, God had showed me I was so happy in that situation because it was where God meant me to be, right? And those people were so kind and they were loving. And so we our life started and we began to get more fluent in the language. But then you come, a word, how do I find out how to say grace in Kaiwa? And God showed us through a situation, which often happens. And one day a woman came by, and we knew her a little bit, and they liked to come by and tell them their news and tell us their news. So she came in and she said, well, guess what? My house got burned down. So, we said, how? And they said, well, some Brazilian farmers were burning their fields, and then the wind came and it blew the fire and it just burned everything. And she said, the thing that I really feel sad about is that it burned my pot that has a lid. And that pot was very important to me because that's where I keep the water and I can keep it clean and the ash doesn't get in it. And now it's gone. She didn't ask for anything. She just was telling us, and then she went on with something else. And I thought to myself, well, I'm sure I can find a pot with a lid that I can give her a little help. So I went and, looked at my stuff and found one that I thought might be suitable. And I said, well, would this help you? Oh, she was over the moon with this pot. And so I went back to finish what I was doing inside the house. And she said to John, she said, your wife, and then she used this long word, oi pore huverico. And he thought, he hadn't heard that one before, Roger. And so he asked her again, and she used it again, oi pore huverico. And so he thought, I'm going to try and find out just what this word means. And so as he began to ask people, he realized that this word meant that your wife knew how to look at me and see my need. And this was the word that we needed for grace. That's God's grace. And so that was how God began to show us words that we couldn't find any other way through situations. And if I go on too long, you have to stand up and walk away because there are so many stories I could tell you, but I really don't want to shortchange you. I need to tell you that because there was also another translator who had been there for a short time, and then she went back to the States because she was sick. She did some study while she was in the States, and years she didn't come back. And so we were there by ourselves. And so eventually she did come back. And so then we had 3 translators. But because I'm a teacher, the primers and all that sort of stuff fell into my lap, which was lovely. We had to give it an alphabet, and I wanted it to be an alphabet that they didn't have to struggle with, so that every time they saw that letter, it always said the same thing, which I think there aren't too many languages in the world that do that. So it is easy to learn to read Kaiwa. The people loved it, and we realized that it was so new that we would have to make just short reading books. And the first one only has 3 letters in it, but it's got enough interest, and they would, interestingly enough, always call we have 8 primers actually, but they would always call them by the picture. When they finished this and completed it, I finished the fire one, I finished the path one, and so on and so forth, and it goes right through to 8. And they got so excited about learning to read their own language. And amazingly enough, when we went on our first furlough, some of them around knew how to write well enough. They wrote letters to us in their language, of course, and gave it to a friend of ours who lived nearby, who sent them to us. And so we kept in touch with them even when we were home for a year's furlough, which was very special. But one thing that happened during that time was a kind of It was a very, very tense situation. But it was the beginning of the spiritual awakening. And because we were the only people that they could come to for things like medicine, they would come all the time. And neither of us were trained in it, but God is the great physician, and I'm thankful for that. So they would come at any hour, and one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody claps outside and shouts, and we went to get out of bed and go to find out what it was. And they said, a man has been bitten by a snake. Mm-hmm. Please, do you have medicine for him? Well, we tried to find out the circumstances. I didn't have much medicine, snake-bite medicine anyway. And we learned that this man and his brother decided they'd like to catch an armadillo because it's good meat. And the armadillos go out to the stream to get a drink in the night. So if you want to catch an armadillo, you have to go out hunting at night. So they crept along this road where this path, not a road, the path through the jungle where this armadillo might go. And then they saw him coming along, so they crept up behind him. And then they got their hands on him. But the armadillo was very smart, and he saw a tree that had a hole in it, and he thought, I'll try and get in that hole out of the way of these people trying to catch me. So he goes along, and he's just got his nose in there, but you see it was already inhabited by a very, very dangerous snake. So the snake comes out, boom, and bites Elijah on both his hands, because he had his hand on the tail of the armadillo. And this man, it's a very, very dangerous. It kills in 8 hours. And this man had then gone back home, and then they did all the usual things, like they put the entrails of the snake all around his body, and they got the rattles and began shaking and singing. And then somebody said, I think we better go and see John and see if he can help. So they arrived at the house, and by this time, a lot of time had passed. It was daylight. And so John said, we don't have enough medicine for him, but I'll go and see what the situation is. So they went to his house, and it wasn't nearby. You had to cross a stream. And then they found, they could hear it, all the chanting and so on. And John could see that he was in a very serious situation. He said, if we don't get you to the Kaiwa mission where there's a hospital, I don't think there's any hope. His wife said, well, I don't think everything hurts him. How are you going to get him there? He can't walk. So John said, I'll carry him. And so he put him on his back, and he was not a small man. Wow. And they had to cross this stream and so on. Meanwhile, we got a Brazilian who had a cart and a horse, and asked if this Brazilian man would kindly take him in when he arrived. So they arrive at the house, and his wife is with him, and my little son watching this whole thing. So just before we got him into the cart, there was only room for him and his wife, so John couldn't go. But John said, before you go, I'm going to pray. And I think this was the first prayer he prayed in Kaiwa. He didn't practice in praying in Kaiwa, but God really enabled him to make it very clear that he was speaking to God and asking for help and for healing. And then off they went. And it was going to be another hour and who knows what before they ever arrived. And my little son, every few minutes he would come and say, Mommy, we've got to pray for that man who's been bitten by the snake. And so we did. Anyway, he arrived there in a coma, and the person who was in charge of the hospital said, I know what he needs, the only thing that will help him, but we don't have any. So let's send him sent somebody into the town to the drugstore and see if they can find this medicine. So off the guy goes, and he went from drugstore to drugstore, and nobody had it. And finally he decided that it wasn't possible, that he wasn't going to get it. So he thought, I'll go to the post office and see if there's any mail for I'm going to drink some water.
Do you want me to get some water?
Sorry. I'll go to the post office and see if there's any mail for the mission, and then I'll go back and tell them the sad tale that there isn't any. So he was given a parcel that had just come, and he went back and he said, no, sorry, nothing doing about the medicine you need, but here's a parcel. And they opened this parcel, and it was full of free samples from a church in Rio de Janeiro. Thanks very much, I think it went round. And they found the medicine that he needed, and he was given the medicine. It took him a few days even to come out of the coma and so on. But he made a full recovery, apart from the fact that his hands were always a little bit like this, because it had damaged the nerves there. And when he came back home, he said to John, he said, I know why I'm better. It was because you prayed for me. And he said, I want to know this God that you talk to. And he became a Christian, and then he wanted to help with the translation. And he and his wife were wonderful. They were marvelous helpers. And they spent hours with us. And then his brother became a Christian and also came. Meanwhile, we were trying to help them learn to read. So we thought we'd better teach the adults first, because if you taught the children first, the adults would feel too ashamed. And so we taught the adults first, and then the children all came later. And so we had a wonderful time, because we got to know the people so well in this way. And I remember the business about gifts. People would come and bring you something. And usually, if it was something to eat, you would put something back in their bag for them to take. And there's something else would tell you what they wanted. But I wondered one day if ever they gave a present. And I thought it would be nice to know if I could give somebody a present and they wouldn't feel they had to give me something back. And so I asked the Lord to help me find this out, and I didn't know how, because how could I ask somebody that? So one day I was visiting my next door neighbor. She was a very Kaiwa, and she was there. And while we were sitting there talking, somebody came to visit her. Now, I happened to know that her husband had just brought a lot of manioc, and she said, go and put it, and she told him where to put it in. So I knew they had quite a lot of manioc. And this person that arrived said, I'm wanting some manioc. Do you have any manioc? So I listened, because I knew she had some manioc. So I listened to her reply, and she said, I don't have a lot. I have enough for my family, but I don't have a lot. And I thought, Lord, thank you. That's very helpful to me. But I still wanted to know, if somebody wanted to give a present, what you would say. And one day, Elijah's wife, Julia, she came, and her husband had been, he found a tree with some honey, a bee's nest up there. He climbed up and got this wonderful honey out of the tree. And they filled several bottles with it. And she brought a bottle of this golden honey to me. And what you say in Kaiwa, if somebody gives you something, say, about what did you bring it? In other words, what do you want in exchange for this? So I said, about what did you bring? She said, I brought it for your children. And that was our answer to that question. And, God is faithful, isn't he? He's faithful to us when we want to follow him. And so that was how he answered it. Well, I don't want to go on too long, so I've now got to get moving.
We're all spellbound.
From my notes, yes. Well, I should tell you that, things were going along, and we finished the New Testament, but it was in 84. That's a long time ago. And when we finally did the Bible, this great big fat Bible, it has the New Testament that we'd done it in 84 in it, you see, to complete the Bible. But the thing is that the language had changed too much. And the young people said, we don't really know that word, or we don't understand that word. And so we knew that this had to be revised. So when it was printed, the Bible Society in Brazil said, well, we're going to just do it as a kind of, a first step. But we're not going to do it on lovely Bible paper. I wish they had. But so can you imagine a mother, she wants to go to church, and she's got a baby, and she's got a string of children, and all these things, and she's not going to carry this to church. No. And it's not very easy to read from because the pages don't stay open. So what we're doing right now is revising, as you see from this thing here, a read-through team, with the Kaiwa, the New Testament, to make it up to date. And the Bible Society have promised to do it in Bible paper, which we can't wait for. But that's why this guy that you saw up there, the devil doesn't leave people alone. He's attacked him. His vision, his tumor, and his to be. So he's sort of out of the count at the moment. And some of these people, even my, you see Dorival, who is my main helper, he got an eye infection, which actually sort of passed on a little bit of it to me. And so that's how the devil does it. He takes people out, doesn't he? And so please pray that this team will be kept in good health and can keep going. And that particularly this one here, whose name is Salvador, Savior, that he will be healed quickly, because he needs the operation on his eyes. Very expensive in Brazil. There's no national health. That's what he needs. And of course, he's got to have an operation on this tumor, and then he's got to get not diabetes. Anyway,
TB.
Sorry?
TB?
No. Anyway, the other thing has got to be taken care of. I mean, he's got plenty to do. So please pray for him. Please pray for him. I just was very interested in the fact that at the end, I think, this picture was taken by one of my sons, and it's a lovely picture, and they're all just listening to the reading of God's Word. This was when we dedicated the New Testament. Now, you'll be horrified at the state of this New Testament, because it looks so dirty. But that's what things look like in Brazil, that's the colour of the dirt. But one little girl said, "Mommy, I want a picture of Jesus like this. I want it in my room by my bed." Their beds, of course, are made of cane poles or whatever. I want it. And so we had to find a way to do that, but we did. And so she had it up in her house, knowing that Jesus was with her all the time. This was his mother. And they said, "We want to cover blue because that's the heaven. Now, aren't we going to heaven? And so let's have blue. Why do we have to have black?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they have to, the Brazilian Bible is black. So we've got to have a black Bible.
Black is the new blue.
Now, as well as these, of course, we did do a lot of other things for them. This is just a little book, a story of theirs about fish and that kind of thing. Then we did a study of their herbal, because they're so marvelous. They know all about these herbs and things. And one of my lady informants, she is the only person that if anybody's got piles, excuse my saying this, but if anybody's got piles, then you go to her, because she knows where to go in the forest, and you get a root from this tree, and you boil it up, and you sit on that water, and they're all cured.
Wow.
I'm telling you. So we, anybody, indeed, come with me next. So the thing is that we made a book about, from what she told us, all the different things she told us, and my children did, she brought samples of everything, and my children did the drawings of them. So that's one of the ways in which they were inspired by the Indians too. So that's what this is, this book here, about the Indians' medicines and valuing their knowledge. We also did a devotional book, which was to help families who wanted to do something at home. So this one has some studies for each day in the week, a different sort of focus. And so there's a passage to read, and there are hymns to sing. They love to sing. Their whole religion, their own religion, is all singing. And so when we published the hymn book, which this is the 12th edition, and it's gone on since then 3 more editions. They just love it, and they come and they buy it. It's not just given because that's how they enter into contact with God, And just recently, amazingly, this little choir, it's not a little choir, it's a children's choir, that one of the Indian young fellows, in fact, when we dedicated this New Testament, he was about this size, and he and his brother, very musical, and they could play the guitar, but they couldn't hold it. So somebody came and held it for them, and they played it. And they sang in 2 parts. And it was just beautiful. And they did that on the occasion of this being dedicated. Well, I want to tell you now, he formed a children's choir. He's an adult, obviously married, probably a grandfather now. And he formed this choir and of young people, and they go from different villages singing, and he wrote the music and words to his own testimony. And I just want to read it to you, because he didn't become a Christian immediately. I mean, he was in a sort of Christian family, but this is translated into English. His testimony in song. Before you were born on this earth, I knew you. I was always calling you and waiting for you. I never abandoned you. And now that you have grown up, I love you and will always love you. I want you to come back to me because I have chosen you. God and I, we are meant for each other. God and I, nothing can separate us. I want to know you, Lord, more and more. Every day I want to know you. You will always be my Lord, my Savior. God and I, we are meant for each other. God and I. Nothing and no one can separate us. It's so beautiful, isn't it? And so guess what? They sang on TV.
Wow.
They were taken, and somebody organized that, and they sang on TV. And it was very, very beautiful, and other hymns as well. And so the music part is it's very important to them, because they have grown up with music, and this has become a way in, and you hear them going around singing. Sometimes when they're out in the field, they'll be singing, and that's just so wonderful. Anyway, I have to just tell you that in the middle of all this, there was a kind of, what would you call it? Kind of a sidetrack in a sense. We went to a conference, a Wycliffe conference, Brazil conference, straight from our tribe. We weren't there. So we were very out of touch with what was going on. And suddenly, John got elected as the director, and that was going to make a big difference to our lives. And so he was straight in, and he had to take it on immediately. And I thought to myself, Lord, now what? What am I supposed to do?
Right.
I mean, I can be a director's wife, okay, but what about the Kaiwa? What about the work and so on? And we had to go and live in Brasilia. And some of the Wycliffe children were using the American school, and so we were providing 2 teachers. And one teacher was there already, and the other one, she was coming from the States, and she sent us a message. She said, I'm going to be 3 weeks late because of my paperwork.
Sure.
So John said, well, he was the director, and he's got to find a teacher, and his wife's a teacher, so would you go and interview at this school? So I went and explained, what I could do, and they said, okay, that's fine. So I went for 3 weeks, but she never came.
Whoa.
She never came at all. And my 3 weeks ended up to be 29 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Short term.
Short term, yes. And what we did, because we couldn't, we did have somebody go into the Kaiwa for a very short time, but it didn't work out very well. So we would put the whole family into our Jeep, our Land Rover, good old Land Rover. As soon as school stopped, and it was holiday time, pile everybody in. And off we went, 800 miles it was, back to the Kaiwa to continue the translation work. And, God was very faithful to us. I mean, that old car, it was always, I don't know how many times we had to stop because we blew a tire or whatever it was. But the children just knew what to do. They got out and they got the things out in turn because they knew the ropes, and so that was how they dealt with it. And certainly they learned a lot when they got back to the Kaiwa. They went fishing, and in fact my second son, he built himself a fishing when he left. He built himself. That's what his work is, with fishing equipment. So he did learn something from that experience. But they were very, very good at adapting. They had to be, didn't they? Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things that I never expected, because I thought, the Kaiwa was what God had called me to, wasn't it? And yet God did that because he had other things he wanted to do. And I remember one day when we used to have a Bible study in the school. But of course, after a while, they got a lot more people in, and they said, no, can't do that. You can't have a Bible study in the school. So we decided to have it in people's houses. And I remember at the beginning of one year, we went there to meet our little Bible study group. And we were, giving requests. And I said, I pray for the school and I pray for people, sort of. But I'd like God really to show me specifically, something more specific to pray for the school. Would you please pray with me about that? And so they said they would. Well, then I started praying, and the Lord said, well, how about the head, he was the head of the junior school, of the, up to 6th grade school, the elementary head. How about praying for him? I said, Lord, he's a man and I don't know him. But I could not get away from it. And so I just started to pray for this man. And then we were having a conference, and we were having a good speaker, and it was at the end of one of our terms. I can't quite remember when it was. At the end of the summer term, I think. And I happened to go into this my headmaster's office, and say, that hoped he had a good vacation and all those things. And then I got talking about the fact that we were having this speaker. And then I said, you could come if you want to. You can come and hear him. So he says, well, I might just do that. And so that night he came. And it was at Pawson, from here. And he was sort of so dumbfounded in a way. He didn't sort of say much. He didn't say anything. And off he went back home. And I kept thinking, what was that about? And then the next day, he brought his wife. And they both, to cut a long story short, because otherwise we'll be here all day, he and his wife both became Christians, and joined our Bible study. And I just thought that was so gracious of the Lord to do that, because I think I was just, in a sense, wasting my time there if I was just praying in general for the school and for the people. But it was a wonderful experience, and I did love it. I mean, I love teaching, so that was it turned out to be a great experience. And the fact that we could continue with the Kaiwa work was even greater. I suppose one of the things that fell to my lot was to try and do publish things that the Indians could read and they could pass out, children could read, and that great things that needed to be discussed could be put into small books. And so that was one of the things that God laid on my heart. And so we did a book on what the scriptures say about marriage, on giving your tenth and giving your money. We did a book on that. We did a book on, by the way, before John died, he did most of Pilgrim's Progress, and I finished it off, and then we got some very nice man here from England, I don't know if you remember. I think he worked with Wycliffe a little, but he did wonderful illustrations, and so that was a great blessing, and we still can pass that out. We still have more copies. So the thing is that we were all the time envisaging the needs that we saw before us, and God gave us the opportunity to fulfill them. So I want to just read, first of all, not read, but show you something that the day I left, which was just last Saturday, I was going to say goodbye to the people at the Kaiwa Mission. And Reverend Benjamin, who is the head of the Kaiwa Mission, he said, just a minute, I've got something to show you. So he brought a box and plonked it at my feet, and I looked at it, and it was full of these. Now these are, it's a devotional book that I've been working on, and We had done a little one once before, but this is a much more amplified one. Do you know the Christian radio thing in the States that RBC is called? You've heard of it probably, but they do a daily reading every day. That's how they used to do it over the radio. But now they print them, and they've gone all over the world doing it in different languages. So they do a reading for the month, And so they asked me to translate these for the month. And they said, let's also fit them with different hymns that you've got in your hymn book that would go along with them. So we did this. We did it in a small way, but this one it's beautiful. I mean, just look at it, isn't that lovely? Mm-hmm. And any family can have this, and then they can follow. And I remember when we did the smaller ones, there was a grandmother, and she lived in her little kind of grandmotherly house at the side of the main house. But she would not go to sleep at night if her grandson hadn't come in and read this to her. And so it has done wonders for them. But this one has also the story of Joseph and his life in their language. And then do you know the Scripture Gift Mission book, the little book of happiness? Anybody remember that? Well, the verses that for all different situations in your life, there are just different Scripture verses. And we had it as a small book. Well, they have put it in here. So they've got that as well. And so if anybody wants to have a look at these, they're here for you to see. And I think my time is really gone. But I just thank you for your attention. And I just thank God for what he's done for Kaiwa. Yeah. And the fact that, they say, sometimes to me, they'll say, people come here and they study our language or they study our culture and so on, and then they go away and then they forget all about us. Well, they're not interested in the people, are they? And so they said, we know that you love us. And that's the main thing. And I just thank God for the opportunity he's given me to do that. Thank you.